If outspoken atheists are to be believed, there is a war raging out there, a war between enlightened reason and primitive superstition. On the side of enlightened reason are those endorsing Darwinian evolution. On the side of primitive superstition are those endorsing the view that life came about purely by special acts of creation by God. But if there is a war raging between Darwinism and creationism, it is only raging in the minds of people on both sides of the debate who do not adequately understand the issues at hand. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist Robert Andrew Millikan put it best. This much I can say with definiteness, namely that there is no scientific basis for the denial of religion, nor is there, in my judgment, any excuse for a conflict between science and religion, for their fields are entirely different. Men who know very little of science and men who know very little of religion do indeed get into quarreling, and the onlookers imagine that there is a conflict between science and religion, whereas the conflict is only between two different species of ignorance. If ever there was a conflict created by oversimplifications and misunderstandings, it would be the conflict between creationism and Darwinism. The question of whether Darwinian evolution is true or not is completely irrelevant to the question of whether or not God exists. The philosopher Alvin Plantinga hits the nail on the head in his book, Where the Conflict Really Lies: Science, Religion, and Naturalism. He writes, "There is no real conflict between theistic religion and the scientific theory of evolution. What there is instead is a conflict between theistic religion and a philosophical gloss or add-on to the scientific doctrine of evolution. The claim that evolution is undirected, unguided, unorchestrated by God or anyone else. For even if everyone were to agree that the Darwinian mechanism of random mutation and natural selection explains the diversification of life from a common ancestor, we would still be left with questions such as, where do natural mechanisms come from? Who or what is responsible for guiding such mechanisms? These are not scientific questions because they can never be subjected to scientific experimentation or direct observation. Rather, they are meta-scientific questions because they underlie science and can only be answered by the application of reason to such things as scientific observation and experiment. Put another way, scientific laws are foundational to science, just as basic arithmetic is foundational to mathematics. Science can never by itself answer the question of why matter follows natural laws, any more than mathematics can answer the question of why 2 + 2 = 4. Natural laws are foundational to science, just as principles of arithmetic are foundational to mathematics. Regarding the inability of science to answer the question of where natural laws come from or who or what enforces them, Albert Einstein wrote, "You find it strange that I consider the comprehensibility of the world, to the extent that we are authorized to speak of such comprehensibility, as a miracle or as an eternal mystery. Well, a priori, one should expect a chaotic world, which cannot be grasped by the mind in any way. The kind of order created by Newton's theory of gravitation, for example, is wholly different. Even if man proposes the axioms of the theory, the success of such a project presupposes a high degree of ordering of the objective world, and this could not be expected a priori. This is the miracle which is constantly reinforced as our knowledge expands." Notice how Einstein says that the order present in such things as the law of gravity is a miracle that is constantly reinforced rather than diminished as our knowledge expands. So what, according to atheism, is the source of this high degree of ordering of the objective world, which Einstein marveled at? What first organizing principle does atheism cite? Proposed natural mechanisms, such as the Darwinian mechanism of random mutation and natural selection, are subject to more fundamental natural laws, such as laws of chemistry, the laws of physics, and the laws of thermodynamics. So let us ask, why is it that material things follow natural laws? Why is this? This again is not a scientific question, but rather a meta-scientific question, because it is a question which is foundational to science and cannot be subjected to direct observation or experimentation, but rather only to reason. The theistic answer to the question of why matter follows natural laws is simple. The same mind that creates matter, God's mind, also directs it. As Robert Boyle, the founder of modern chemistry, put it, the nature of this or that body is but the law of God prescribed to it, and to speak properly, a law is but a notional rule of acting according to the declared will of a superior. Or, as James Joule, the propounder of the first law of thermodynamics, for whom the thermal unit joule was named, put it, it is evident that an acquaintance with natural laws means no less than an acquaintance with the mind of God therein expressed. Or, as Albert Einstein put it, everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man, and one in the face of which we with our modest powers must feel humble. Some atheists and agnostics watching are no doubt headed for the tried and true escape hatch of claiming that these citations were taken out of context. No, sorry. Although he never took the leap of becoming a Christian, Albert Einstein was very explicit about his belief in God. He said, "In view of such harmony in the cosmos which I, with my limited human mind, am able to recognize, there are yet people who say that there is no God. But what really makes me angry is that they quote me for the support of such views." But what answer does the matter-first model, in which atheism is grounded, provide to the question of why matter follows natural laws? Well, only various versions of matter follows natural laws because it just does. But it just does is not an explanation. Rather, it is a failure to explain. So why then did Darwin insist that his theory of evolution was an alternative explanation to God creating life? The answer is very simple. He didn't. Like Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin was very explicit about his belief in God. In his autobiography, Darwin wrote, "Another source of conviction in the existence of God, connected with the reason and not with the feelings, impresses me as having much more weight. This follows from the extreme difficulty, or rather impossibility, of conceiving this immense and wonderful universe, including man with his capacity of looking far backwards and far into futurity, as the result of blind chance or necessity. When thus reflecting, I feel compelled to look to a first cause having an intelligent mind in some degree analogous to that of man, and I deserve to be called a theist." So if Charles Darwin was not the one who insisted that evolutionary theory is an alternative explanation to God, who was it? Well, it was people in academia who view the world through the matter-first lens, as I described in the intro video. People who insist on adding the philosophical gloss or add-on to the scientific doctrine of evolution because they insist on viewing the world through the matter-first lens, materialism, and not because they can provide an alternative explanation to God for the, quote, high degree of ordering of the objective world, which Albert Einstein marveled at. The Harvard University geneticist Richard C. Lewontin famously spilled the beans on this philosophical gloss or add-on, aka ideology, in 1997. Lewontin writes, "We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just-so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but, on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is an absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door." Stay tuned for my next video titled "Why Life Could Not Have Emerged Without God," to understand why the origin of life from non-living matter can never be explained while viewing the world through the matter-first lens, known as materialism.